Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Altispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines, they're open as always. 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email, live@asknoahshow.com. My name's Noah Chalaya. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah Show kicks off this evening. Joining me, my co-host, Mr. Steve Ovens. Welcome in, sir.
Wow, that was... grandiose.
I'm very excited to see you.
Overwhelmed.
I'm excited to hear you.
Well, here I am.
Well, here you are. Steve, do you mind telling me about your war story with Immich?
Well, it's not over yet, so I suppose it's just a report. So,
live from the battlefield.
Yeah, right. I did the thing that you're never supposed to do, and I just seemed to update software without actually reading the release notes. How terrible. So this ended up biting me because when I upgraded the Immich, it had been a little bit, not super long, but a little bit since I updated it. I get around to updating my my container images, I don't know, once every couple of months, something like that. And there was a database schema migration that happened between versions, and it failed. And so I was left in a state. I found people who had reported it on GitHub and stuff like that. And so there are two solutions. You can either do what's called like a clean slate or like restart, which is essentially dump the database, let the migration happen, or let it reinstantiate itself. But then you lose your albums and the face scanning and all of the rest of that stuff. Or you
just
can
to be clear, because I feel like this is a really important thing, but you keep the pictures. Like the pictures are safe, but you lose all of the accoutrements surrounding the picture.
Correct, all of the metadata, right? Because this is a problem with the database, not a problem with the pictures themselves.
Gotcha.
So there, you could also try and figure out where it failed and go in and start surgically pruning the database, which is the route that I opted to go. It took me a little bit to figure out. Because while the person on GitHub did an admirable job trying to describe it, it's obvious that they were more comfortable with Postgres than I am. And so it took me a little bit to kind of translate their words. And there wasn't even enough for me to pass on to my AI buddy to get a sense of what it was, because it didn't have access to logs and all the rest of that sort of stuff. So anyways, I got past that. And the upgrade completed. And then I went into the UI and all I have are blurry images.
Oh, no.
So I'm not exactly sure what has happened other than like I see errors streaming in the logs. And this is 100% going to be a case of I didn't read the release notes and I missed something, and they changed some sort of environment variable, or there's something in the Docker Compose that I should have changed. It's going to be that for sure. But when it was one of those, hey honey, I just have to take everything offline to roll the updates, it was like, well, this thing's not coming back. I'm sorry. And it was a shrug. I haven't looked at it in several months anyways. So it got deprioritized and is sitting in a semi-functional state. Like you can get to the web UI, but you can't see any pictures because they're all blurred out.
Okay, so here's a question for you. In playing devil's advocate a little bit, why fix it at all if it's not a thing? Is it just a function of professionalism? Like I wanted to play with the toy, and so now I set the toy up. So now when time allots and when I get to it in the priority list, I want to fix it to knowledge for knowledge's sake, or otherwise, why fix it?
I'm probably not going to. This is probably going to be the kick I need to go actually look at self-hosting the NT photos that we've mentioned once or twice. So, but it's one of those things that like the database thing turned out to not be that big of a deal. Like I have enough database knowledge to be dangerous. So I was able to parse it around after I found the correct log files to go look at because essentially you had to figure out which section of the migration failed and then associate that with a specific row and column inside of the table and then do some stuff to that. So it wasn't too bad, that got me to the point where the containers stood up. So the containers weren't starting, and that's what bothered me. I'm like, oh, it's just like crash loop back off sort of thing. It just kept crashing. So I don't know. I might take another 20-minute poke at it, and if I can resurrect it, wonderful. At least then I don't know. I was gonna say at least then it's running, but it's more, honestly, you know what it is? I made a dashboard for my wife for all the links in the house that also do uptime. And I told her everything's up now. And then I went to the dashboard and there's like this big red circle over Immich, which she doesn't use anyways, but it's a giant red circle on the dashboard of upness.
Listen, let me tell you something. I can relate. I had an outlet in my house that I had an electrician over for a completely separate thing. And he comes to the kitchen and he's like, oh, yeah, this outlet isn't working. I'm like, well, I didn't even know there was an outlet there. And he goes, yeah, there is. I guess you don't use it much. And I'm like, no, I've never once used it because I didn't know it was there. And he goes like, oh, yeah, so we won't worry about that. Anyway, back to the thing. I'm like, oh, back up. Did you say that outlet doesn't work? And he goes, yeah, but I mean, if you and your wife don't use it, I mean, there's no point in fixing it. I'm like, but now I know that there's a thing, and I know that the thing doesn't work, and every time I walk past it, it's going to drive me nuts. We're going to have to add that. We're going to have to fix that. He's like, really? You just told me you don't use it. I'm like, right. I mean, but now I know it doesn't work, so now it needs to be fixed. And so it's one of the I can relate perfect. I completely understand what you're talking about. It's like it's a red mark. It's a bad thing. It's something that needs to be fixed. So either you deprioritize it to the point that you're like, it's getting kicked out of my life, and then it gets removed from the dashboard, and then it's just gone. That's one solution. Or the second solution is you got to poke around at it and see if you can bring it back up, so that you go from a red X back to a green thing.
Yep, pretty much.
I can relate 100%. Do you want to do some feedback and solve some other people's problems?
Let's hope that I can get to that.
Aaron writes in and says, howdy Noah and Steve. A while back you mentioned a tool called LubLogger for tracking car maintenance, and you talk about Ansible all the time. While I'm a big fan of Ansible, and LubLogger is awesome, so I made an Ansible role that I'd like to share with you, and he links to it at codeberg.org. It will help install LubLogger, the Docker container, and there's even an option to enable Let's Encrypt for HTTPS SSL connections. Yes, I even encrypt my connections on my LAN. The caveat on the Let's Encrypt part, I only have it working with domains from Cloudflare. Thanks for the great content. Stay awesome, Aaron. So, Steve, are you mechanically inclined to your vehicle at all, or is your fixing of problems strictly limited to technical / building stuff?
I am definitely not mechanical in nature. It didn't go, hey, Mr. Mechanic, please fix this for me.
So I can relate. I start there. I very much do. I start with hey, say a prayer, stick the key in, turn or press, and then if it works, we're good. If it's not good, hey, mechanic person, come help. But I'm trying to get more into being mechanically self-sufficient. And for me anyway, the way that I had to go about doing that was I can fix my lawnmower. I can troubleshoot small engines just fine. I grew up water skiing. And so if you have ever been on a boat, you have any experience whatsoever with a boat, you know that you will be a part-time mechanic if you want to use your boat. Otherwise, you'll just spend $1,000 after the other inside of a shop, and you'll never actually spend any time on the lake with your boat. You'll just it will live most of its life inside of a mechanic shop. And so to the extent that you can troubleshoot basic things, suck, squeeze, bang, blow, where in that process are things going awry, and fix them, you'll be good. To the extent that you're not interested in that, so be it. And I've slowly tried, I'm working myself up to older cars are like big lawnmowers that have four wheels and you can drive around on them, so I can start to kind of translate some of that knowledge in. When you start getting into like super modern cars, particularly these ones that have where like Windows servos have MAC addresses and you need proprietary software and special computers to, like, I'm out. I don't have any interest in that. I don't want to have any interest in that. I don't like the fact that that's a thing. I'm 100% out. I'll just drop it off at a mechanic and let them do it. So I'm with you there. But LubLogger is for those if you haven't played with it, for those who want to do their own maintenance on their cars. You want to, even if you don't want to do the maintenance on your car, if you just want to track the maintenance on your car in one cohesive place, if you go to the exact same mechanic every time and they're modern and with the times, they probably have some sort of software thing. Scans your VIN number in when you walk through the door, scans your telephone number, keeps track of the miles, keeps track of the tire rotations, keeps track of the fluids, and you've changed them in belts and all the rest of it. If you don't have that, or if you're like me and your mechanic is a seasoned gentleman who does the same things in 2025 as he did them in 1955, then Lube Logger might be for you and might be a great way for you to track what's being done on your vehicle. And with an Ansible playbook, I'll have to take a look at what Aaron put together, but there have absolutely been times, and Steve, you're going to shudder with embarrassment over me, there have absolutely been times when a playbook has allowed me to set a thing up that I would have never taken the time to go do on my own. Like, I would have never gone and set all the bits and bobs up on my own, but I'll run the playbook if it'll set all those things up for me. Now, Steve is banging his head in frustration against the desk that's foolish because you're putting onto the planet a thing that you won't be able to fix when it breaks. And he's 100% correct. So don't do that if that's your long-term plan. But if you just want to get it up and see what Lube Logger is all about and how it works and all the rest of it, this might be a great on-ramp to do that. So thank you, Aaron. Would you ever track the stuff on your car, even if you wouldn't do it yourself?
I might consider that, except that a lot of that, we tend to have it done at the dealer. Yeah. I know there's people out there that shudder over that, but and because of that, then there's a service record and it's pretty extensive. So
yeah, in fact, they'll have like service plans, right? They'll say like you're following maintenance schedule A or maintenance schedule B or whatever, and they break it all out nice for you. And here's the thing. I understand what you're getting from as far as like, that's the most expensive place to take. There's a trade-off there, though, right? The other trade-off is they're the people that built the thing. And so when they run into weird problems, eventually that phone call makes its way all the way to the engineer who designed it. I know that because we have some GM dealerships as clients. And so I've seen on the inside how that process works. They run into problems or they don't know how to fix the thing. Eventually they can get an engineer on the phone to say, why is this bar here? Where does this cable go? And they'll be like, oh, that's from this design. It's in this way for this. And you got to do that. And then they'll explain it to them and then you can fix it. So you're onto something, Steve. There's wisdom in that.
Well, there's also, so the dealer does have some niceties here. For example, when they come to us. As in, like, they service the car right here. So they've done several recalls in my driveway.
Wow.
There's also, like, some mechanics have this, but they have a pickup and drop off service, which is really nice because it's across town. So you drive it over there and, I don't know, pick your nose until it's done, right? So they pick you up and drop you off and or drop the car off. We've also had them do that. So they just drop the car off. So there are advantages, and some of it's lazy because you have some level of I know that, like, brand recognition is the same thing as trusting the dealership, except that it's somewhat easier to believe that your dealership is going to be at least able to fix the problem. Whereas if you go and hunt up a mechanic, you actually kind of have to know what you're looking for when you look for a mechanic. And then we get right back to where we are now, which is, I don't know enough about this stuff. So
yeah. Yep, 100%. So if you're a car person, check out Lube Logger. If you're not a car person and want to check out Lube Logger, check out the Ansible playbook. Our second email comes in from David. David writes in and says, hi, Noah and Steve. I have a lot of good luck with my Zeisel access point. It has multiple VLANs and SSID, and it has cloud control or local control. I also have the ability to give our son a 0.5 megabyte Wi-Fi when he acts up. I tell him I'm going to give him dial-up. This annoys him more than fully cutting off the Wi-Fi completely. Imagine a slow Fortnite update at that speed. An upgrade question. I have a Dell R420. It has dual E5 2430 V2s. Would upgrading to a 2470 V2 be a better option than upgrading the GPU? The best it can do is a GT 1030 or similar Quadro. I doubt I can find many 4 gigabyte versions. This is to help speed up the AI text-only chatbot. I have an AI container set up with 20 gigabytes and 20 virtual cores. I gave it unlimited once it decimated the server. 20 out of 24 threads seems to allow most normal functions of the Proxmox host. I would increase the virtual CPU to 35, though it does nearly double the energy usage. David. So, Steve, this is 100% in your wheelhouse. What would you do if you woke up in David's shoes?
So I don't know enough about the R420. I kind of took a poke at it, but I wasn't really sure what I was looking at to be able to ascertain what actually you could get in terms of a graphics card. Like, I don't, as far as I know, a PCI slot is a PCI slot, and it doesn't prevent you from putting a newer generation in there, except for like, okay, it can't be a double slot because I've got a single, like I've got a 1U pizza rack, right? Like there are those kind of restrictions, but in terms of generations, I wasn't aware that there's any generational lock. So having said all that, it depends on the model that you are trying to run your AI on. If it doesn't fit in the VRAM, then getting a graphics card doesn't help you, like just full stop. So upgrading your CPUs will help because of the additional cores. So that can help a lot. One of the other things you might consider doing, if this is a dedicated or a mostly dedicated box, so you don't really run much else on there, you might consider disabling the hyperthreading. Hyperthreading on particularly these style tasks where it doesn't have to juggle, like if you were running this on top of a host that had 5 VMs and it was like trying to balance all these things complexly, the following advice might not apply. But if it's a relatively purpose-built box, hyperthreading actually will slow down the amount of processing that you can do. And there's some complications in terms of like what does the virtual thread do with the memory that it's allocated, like the cache that's allocated and all that sort of stuff, and how it has to slice up cache and all of that stuff. We don't have time to get into that, but all that to say is for purpose boxes, you can get somewhere between 10 and 50% boost just by disabling the hyperthreading because of the way that the context switching has to happen in order to accommodate that virtual thread. So that's something you could consider. But yeah, if you go from throwing 20 cores at it and you almost double your cores by throwing 35 cores at it, then you're obviously going to see an increase there, even though the difference between those chips in terms of raw compute power isn't high. It's the extra thread count that is going to help you there.
I'll speak to this just because I just walked through this path with my son, like within weeks. So he had a 15-year-old PC, and he decided that he wanted to save up his money, and he wanted to buy really what he thought he wanted was a newer graphics card. And to address the point that you touched on, to say there isn't really a limit on how much newer. That's true to a degree, right? Like they try to make PCI slots backwards compatible. So if you have a PCIe 4 GPU, you'll be able to put it in a PCIe E3 slot. That part is true. The things that he ran into were BIOS support. So there's a limit to when they stop producing BIOS updates, that seemed to be the first thing to just get the thing to see the card. And the second thing was power supply. If you got the room, you got the horsepower and or the connectors for a newer generation GPU, and then does it have the horsepower to actually drive that thing? But beyond that, yeah, if it fits in there, in theory, it should work. There might be bottlenecks, right? Because if you don't have the PCI lanes to carry all the traffic, you might see some performance bottlenecks, but it should technically work.
Yeah, so like you're right about the bottlenecks, and that would be more important for gaming, and you would know that you're not getting the maximum amount, but you're talking about like a Xeon V2 versus a GPU which actually has CUDA cores that can do the work, right? And so you're talking about basically an ancient CPU will lose every time every day of the week to a smaller GPU that has enough CUDA cores and VRAM to run your model, like guaranteed. It will just be trounced. It doesn't matter how many cores you throw at it. So I've got a really big box that's got 128 threads, and I ran this. Like I tossed like 100 threads at it, and running it on a what was it? Was it a 3060 or something? No, it was older than that. It might have been my 1060. The 1060 beat it, and it's just because the graphics processor is orders of magnitude faster than the CPU.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I have, at the time that I was running it, which is now not true, but it was one generation less than the most current AMD server processors. And so I threw 100 of those cores at it, and the GPU still trounced it. So
wow,
you're talking about like orders of magnitude difference in terms of how that functions. Now, there's something to be said for AMD and Intel both now have like AI CPUs, and they are supposed to be like phenomenal at being able to do that because they're purpose built. But the stuff that we're dealing with, you know, the non-expensive stuff, it'll get trounced.
Interesting. Very interesting stuff. So, David, hopefully that helps you. Give us an email or call back. Let us know how that worked out for you. Chris writes in and says, "Hey, Noah and Steve, I love the show. I have TrueNAS running on my server at home. I'm looking at setting up a remote backup. I just have a USB drive connected to a B-Link at my brother-in-law's house. I'm looking at using ZFS Send because of its efficiency, but read that ZFS Send may have issues on removable drives. I'm also concerned about bit rot, as it's a single remote drive and wouldn't be scrubbed. I'm also looking at just using rsync. I think it will resolve the bit rot issue, but I'm concerned about the bandwidth requirement. What's your suggestion? Thanks for all you do." So, Steve, what would you do? Would you do rsync or ZFS Send?
I probably would still try doing a ZFS Send. I'm a little tenuous on leaving USB drives connected all the time, right? Because they're not meant to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, for that reason, the ZFS Send and Receive is going to be more efficient, which means you're going to push less across the USB.
Mm-hmm.
And you're probably going to have a better time with that just in general. As for the bit rot issue, theoretically, you're not going to have any bit rot, even if you're just doing rsync to a ZFS drive. Okay, well, let's be clear about this. ZFS is going to detect the bit rot, even doing rsync, right? If you're scrubbing your drive or the files are being touched, the checksums are being done, and so the bit rot might not be self-healed, but you'll have some data protection from the standpoint of you're never going to open a JPEG and have part of it garbled, right? It'll either open or it won't. And so from that perspective, you're going to have ZFS is going to help you detect that bit rot. Now, there's a couple things you could do. On a single disk, this is still a consideration you could do. You can set the number of copies to 2 on your data set. And what this will do is it's going to create 2 copies of it and checksum both copies, and then it provides it a level of self-healing. It's not going to help you if your drive dies, obviously, but if it's, I got bit rot, or I have a bad sector in my hard drive and I know I need to replace it, but this is going to save me until I can pull that hard drive offline and actually get a good solid backup of this somewhere else. Mm-hmm. That's another thing that I've done as a stopgap in the past is set your really important stuff to a copies of 2, and then ZFS will deal as if it has more than one drive and do the self-healing thing.
Yeah, 100%. When would you use rsync over ZFS Send? It's obviously not efficient. Is there any scenario in which you would say, yeah, that's the right call?
So I still use rsync, even though I've moved. Yeah, I don't think aside from my endless machines, I don't have any machines now that don't even have ZFS en route. So I'm taking snapshots all over the place. Mm-hmm. However, I still do push, like files, like surgical files around with rsync or with the Nextcloud sync. So it's still useful. It's just not I don't use it for backup. It's like, I need to push this over and I don't want to futz around with, setting up data, like whatever. I don't want to do the send and receive because I don't necessarily need all of it now. I just need this thing right now.
Mm-hmm. You tell me if this is a wise approach or old man on my lawn kind of thing, kid get off my lawn sort of mentality. Particularly when I'm working with a company that has a system administrator, and particularly when that system administrator has years of experience or is very comfortable with rsync, the first rule I've always, and I think the first part of this you'll agree with, any backup thing you do, you should understand it and be willing to do the thing, or you shouldn't use it. Because if you don't understand how your backup thing is working, it's going to be a struggle for you to troubleshoot it. That's the part I think you'll agree with me on. But the part where I'm wondering if I'm being a little bit old man or if this is a wise approach is I will push that to almost to the extreme, to where if somebody says, yeah, I'm comfortable with it, or I'm used to it, and I say, hey, do you have to know that thing works? You have to be able to check on it, and you have to be able to do that, and you have to just go the rsync route. It's going to take more time. It will be less efficient, but I think you get two things out of it. One is you've got 30 some years of, hey, this is how we've done it. This is how we've always done it. And it's always worked that way. And so it's not the most efficient. It's not the newest kid on the block, but it absolutely gets the job done. And the second thing is it gives you a second way in the event that something else goes wrong. You have two different ways that you're moving data. And so if you have ZFSN that's going from primary to backup, that almost always makes sense. And then you're pushing off site, you have the ability, or you're pushing to some other thing, then you have the ability to, whether it's, I've got one client, they pull hard drives out of a safe and they plug them in and they sync drives that way. And so in those regards, it's not that it's not possible to use ZFSN to do it, but there'd be a couple more steps involved. And so from a simplicity, from I can wrap my head around it standpoint, am I approaching that the right way, or do you think I'm just stuck in an old way and I'm an old dog unwilling to learn new tricks?
No, I think that there's value in understanding the tool that you're using well. There's also value in a little bit of diversification. So my one cold hard drive not my one external hard drive, it's formatted XFS, so I rsync to it. And it is just generally considered good practice to have different operating systems. So my backup NAS is a different operating system with a different brand of drives in it, even though it's running ZFS. But the idea is you should have some level of diversification to protect yourself, not only against like problems with your your main backup having a problem, but bugs that might be introduced, right? So I've got RHEL and Arch, and one or the other might have some sort of bug that's been introduced for some reason or other, like maybe the ABI was broken for ZFS on RHEL and it's not on Arch, and so then you have a recovery point. So whenever you're thinking about trying to defend against something, it's always defense in depth, right? Now, is it overkill for home? Probably, but that's something that you can consider.
It's the classic 3-2-1 rule, right? Keep 3 copies of your data on 2 different sources of medium with 1 offsite. So what you're talking about there to a degree is your XFS drive is formatted differently. It's using a different system, and so you have 2 different forms of medium. Now, to be fair, I think when that rule was written, they're really talking more about like tape and hard disk sort of a deal. And so if they're all hard disks, I suppose we're skirting that rule, bending that rule, breaking that rule. But you get the idea. You're trying to leverage different diversification things to try to increase your chances that you wouldn't have a single failure that takes you out.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Anything else you would add for Chris? Is there anything that, big picture he should be considering? I will tell you the thing that comes to mind when I read Chris's scenario. This was kind of a blunder in my IT career, but I was so proud of myself. I was getting everything set up. This is right when, you were getting to the offices were getting connected to the internet. And so they were doing site to site VPNs to get everything. And it was like, hey, you can be in one office and it's kind of like being in every office, but the internet wasn't quite there, to make everything work from remote offices like it did in the main office. But we were trying to kind of brush that under the rug at the time. And it was a really exciting time. And I stubbed my toe, Steve. I went to a client and I was like, absolutely, you can put your backup server in their office. That's a great idea. Then if primary office burns down, you'll have all your data in the backup office and it'll be no big deal. And the math that I didn't do, the math that I should have done that I didn't do was I didn't bother to look and say, how much new data is being generated each day? And what is the total bandwidth between these two offices? And, at the time, they, it was a lot of Word docs, and at best it was pictures. There was certainly, if there was video, it was very early days and super far in between. So we weren't talking about huge amounts of data, but it just turned out that the way the internet path between their two offices meant that they didn't have the bandwidth to both do the backups and function as a normal office during the day. And so it was a bit of a blunder. That was the day I learned that you can rate limit rsync. And so it wasn't a big deal. We scheduled the updates at night and then just rate limited it, and it was fine, and it worked out, and everything was fine. And I learned a couple things through it. But when I hear Chris's question, that's the first thing I think about is whether the ZFS send is going to absolutely be the more efficient route. But no matter what you do, I would do a little bit of iPerf testing / preparation insofar as watch it the first couple of times and make sure you don't tank your in-laws' house or you don't tank your own house. And that the time that you're going to allow, if you're doing a nightly backup, let's say, make sure that the amount of data that changes in a 24-hour period doesn't exceed that of what you're going to be able to push over a pipe in 24 hours, if that makes sense.
It does. I think the last thing that I would say about this is I see the B-Link and a USB drive, and my first thought is, okay, if you have the B-Link, I understand you're economizing. If it's worried about small footprint and power consumption, you'd probably be better served to go to eBay and get one of those 1 liter PCs or something that you can slot. So the other thing you could do, if you don't want to do eBay, this is what I actually do for mirroring like our home videos and stuff like that. I actually went and got one of those Odroids that supports 2 SATA devices, and they also sell a case that is just big enough for 2 hard drives stacked on top of itself with a 120 millimeter fan. So the entire thing is as wide as a hard drive and as thick as the fan is itself. So it's really a low footprint. Gets you 2 like physical hard drives, plus it also has a slot for an NVMe drive or whatever. You're much better served for that than actually sticking this over a USB, right? If you're constrained by budget, and I have the B-Link, I get it. But if you have any wiggle room at all, I would look at either going with like a 1 liter PC or something like the Odroid, where all together with the hard drives and the case and the Odroid itself, you're talking like maybe $300. You're going to be much better set because it's going over like an actual SATA connection, and the quality of a hard drive is significantly better when it's not a USB hard drive. So the thing to remember is USB hard drives are the lowest of the low. Like these are the things that did not pass muster to be able to sell to the enterprise nor to the average consumer as part of internal drives. So they're already meant to not be on and handling much traffic. So big caution about USB drives. Know what you're getting into. Do some reading about that.
This discussion has prompted one thing to bring to the forefront of my mind. I promise what's about to come out of my mouth is not a joke, but I think it may be relevant to our discussion. And that is RFC 2549, or later RFC 6214. It is IPOAC. Are you familiar with IP over avian carriers? This is not a joke. I'm dead serious. This is an actual RFC. There's a guy by the name of David Weitzman, something like that, and he actually released an RFC that proposes a protocol and specified it out in RFC with IP over avian carriers with quality of service, I might add. It was released on April 1st, get it, 2011, and then 13 years after the introduction, IPv6, Brian Carpenter and Robert Hinden published an adoption of RFC 1149 for IPv6. So you can do either way, but basically they wanted to figure out if you're trying to send data from point A to point B, at some point, it's faster to attach like an SD card or whatever to a carrier pigeon and send the carrier pigeon and have them drop the thing off. And you can move more data quicker that way than you could over like a landline phone kind of a thing. So, I mean, I'm not suggesting, Chris, that you go that route. I'm just suggesting, Chris, that you're aware that that sort of thing exists. It could potentially help you.
So can I take us on like a weird tangent?
Please do.
So not my idea. I heard somebody else say this, but I thought you jogged it. So on the idea of avians and stuff like that, I thought about pigeons. And one of the things I thought was a really interesting way to think about things, sometimes just the word that you use phrases things differently. So you know how we've long said that running in the cloud is just a word for running on somebody else's computer.
Yes.
And that helps you frame things. I heard people talking about AI this week, and they were saying, if you just substituted the word AI for pigeon, you would have a completely different idea of what it is. So if you just simply said, you know what, I'm going to have the pigeon sort the CVs that are coming into my company and determine which ones are going to be the best match for us, you'd have all kinds of problems. But somehow, because we call it AI, we think that it's better. So I just thought you triggered the idea of pigeons. And if you just think about, if I swap the word AI for pigeon, how is that going to, I'm going to get a pigeon to write this executive brief for me.
I trained a thing to do a thing, and now it's doing the thing. It just sounds more technologically savvy if I say AI than if I say pigeon.
I just thought it was cute. Well, thank you for letting me take us on that tangent.
From the Linux Newswire newsroom, this is the Week in Review with JT.
For the week of August 24th, 2025, here's the Linux and open source news. Firefox 142 is now available. Thunderbird 142 is also available. LibreOffice 25.8 is now out. GNU Nano 8.6 has been released. FFmpeg 8.0 has also been released. Git 2.15 is out, and the Linux 6.15 kernel has reached end of life. So if you're running any systems with that kernel, you need to update. In distro news, Tails has announced the availability of 6.19. In open source security news, Ring Reaper sneaks right past Linux EDRs. The highly sophisticated post-compromise tool abuses the Linux kernel's IOU ring interface to remain hidden from endpoint detection and response systems. Arch Linux continues to feel the force of a DDoS attack after 2 brutal weeks. Attackers are yet to be identified as the project struggles to restore full service. In open source AI news, X's Grok 2.5 is now open source and available for download, and Elon Musk states that Grok 3 will also be open sourced eventually. Open source platform Edicium 1.0 brings AI to networking. OpenCUA's open source computer use agents rival that of proprietary models from OpenAI and Anthropic. And Knoppix makes using AI on Linux a snap by embedding AI tooling in its latest release. And lastly, Quantum fleshes out quantum software stack with open source Guppy and Selene. Guppy is an open source language hosted inside Python. Guppy enables quantum computing programming above the gate level using conditional logic and the availability to incorporate any quantum error correction code. Selene is an emulator that models realistic entangled quantum behavior. The goal is to make quantum software research and development easier.
Due in part to Steve's Wi-Fi issues, but also I'm trying to explore my own skill set, I have fallen down the rabbit hole deep with OpenWRT. And last week, a listener sent in the table of hardware from openwrt.org. And oh my gosh, there is hardware galore on there. And that led me down a further rabbit hole of I have been picking up every router I can get my hands on that is in any sort of bin, that came out of any sort of project, that any sort, there's people as the resident nerd, you get people that are like, I pulled all this stuff out of my house. Do you want it? It's just trash. Sure, I'll take it. And most of the time, my intention is take the power brick off, coil the cable up, throw it in the power brick board, throw the antiquated non-open sourcey piece of technology in the trash. And then if somebody comes and says, I need a 12-volt power supply, here, let me help you out. That's generally my goal. And I found myself going back and finding all of these devices to flash OpenWRT. And I'm pleasantly surprised to be able to report to you that I'm struggling to find a piece of technology I can't flash OpenWRT onto. That led me down the following track. As a network professional, I believe to my core that I should be able to deploy my skill, be able to use that skill set at any time, any place, under any circumstance with any tool. And the rationale that I came up with was, if I were to pick your famous tennis player, a crappy wooden racket with holes inside of the netting, and you gave me the most fancy carbon fiber, brand new, wrist braced, blah, 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 tennis racket, do you believe that it would give me any measurable advantage on the tennis court to the professional tennis player? The answer to which, of course, is no. And so if that's true, and I were to apply that to my own skill set, then it shouldn't matter if it's the rinky-dink router included with the OEM cable modem type of a thing, or if it's a full-fledged OpenSense router running on a big x86 computer platform with 96 gigs of RAM and 4 terabytes of storage and 10 cores. Shouldn't matter in theory. But in practicality, when you're trying to do your job on things that weren't designed to do your job, you run into stupid limitations like, oh, there is no way to specify DNS host names. Oh, there's no way to do DNS overrides. Oh, there's no way to have this call out to a dynamic DNS client. Oh, there's no way to, in some cases, change the DHCP range, create static reservations, those sorts of things. OpenWRT fits the bill in almost every one of these circumstances. And so I wanted to shine a little bit of light on OpenWRT and some of the places that are highlighting it. Now, you've heard me talk about the OpenWRT 1. I'll get there, but I want to take you all the way down to the other end of the spectrum. If you wake up and say to yourself, I need a router, and I don't have many dollars to spend on one, but I want it to be open source. I want to be able to do all the things that Noah and Steve talk about on the program. What should I get? My new answer to that question, it's not really a new answer. I'm actually kind of circling back to it. But the answer to that question is the GL.iNet GLMT300N, colloquially referred to as the Mango. And they call it the Mango because it literally looks like a square mango. Now, Steve, you have one of these in your backpack. Why?
Because it's a great travel router. You take it out, it's pluggable by USB. It also has 2 Ethernet ports if you have to have an Ethernet port for that. I also run ad blocking directly on it. You can't load it down with all of the things that you might run at home, but as a way to filter traffic, it's great. You can also make connections back home via WireGuard, for example. I think you can do Tailscale. I think there are packages.
Yes.
It even has its own package manager. So all goodness.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool little device. Now, here's the dirty little not so secret about GL.iNet. Effectively, China, Taiwan are producing routers. And over time, things like the WRT54G are being made in these countries, but sold with the Linksys brand. And Linksys says we're not going to update the software on it. So therein lies the creation of OpenWRT and then, DDWRT and some others. Over time, the fine folks over in China and Taiwan went, they all want the router and they want to be able to write the firmware to it. And they're not even really interested in the thing. In fact, all these companies are just taking OpenWRT and they're ripping them off. And then that's why the SFC is suing them. And why don't we just make a router and put OpenWRT on it? But wait, that will get confusing. There's too many options here. So let's strip it down. So gl.inet makes a router, puts OpenWRT on it from the factory, and then nerfs it by way of a UI they call Domino. Now, if you don't know much about OpenWRT, or frankly you don't care, Domino is a drastic improvement because it makes it look nice, it's approachable, it looks effectively like you would get from any consumer-grade router. The part that Steve alluded to is by clicking one button, you can turn advanced mode on and you have full access to the regular OpenWRT interface. Additionally, because it's running OpenWRT under the hood, OpenWRT publishes images that you can flash onto it where it just removes Domino altogether, and then the only thing you have is OpenWRT. So if you were to start at one end of the spectrum, for $29, you can have a very capable open source router that you can learn on, and that skill set will directly translate up through more expensive hardware. You want to be under $100? Check out the gl-inet GLB3000. Now, this is colloquially referred to as the picture frame router because it doubles as, you guessed it, a picture frame. They call it the Marble, and it's a Wi-Fi 6 router for modern homes. It looks like a white square, but it's designed in such a way that you can put art or a photo inside or on the router itself and then connect the little cables to it. And so nobody will necessarily know that it's a router. It comes with a little kickstand. And so you can either have it as like a desk photo, or you can hang it on the wall and have a wall photo. It's an absolutely little fantastic device, and it costs under $60. And so if you're looking for a router that's less than $50, you can get the Mango for $29. If you're looking for a router less than $100, you can get the Marble for $59. And then if you're looking at the other end of the spectrum, I would tell you once you get past $150, or once you get past $100, I'm going to tell you just buy the OpenWRT one for $114. Why? First of all, it is absolute no compromise hardware. I've purchased several of them now and installed them in friends and family homes. Don't have any clients that are using them yet, but I've personally installed many of them and had absolutely fantastic luck. And I actually took the opportunity to start my children down the road of OpenWRT to say, hey, I'm going to give you some limited control over the Wi-Fi network and the network that you connect to, so you can see your devices popping up. You can set your own static reservations. You can do some of those, and I'm using OpenWRT to do that. So I think it's a great on-ramp for people that want to get into more advanced networking but don't quite have their feet around them, or maybe don't want to drop hundreds of dollars on a really nice piece of hardware. But I think once you exceed that $100 price point, I'm going to encourage you in the strongest possible way to buy the OpenWRT 1, which not only is a really fantastic, well-built piece of hardware, it also supports the people that make OpenWRT and supports the SFC and supports Banana Pi, the hardware partner that they chose to work with them to bring this thing into existence. So for all of those reasons, that would be my choice once you exceed $100. Now, all of this playing with gl-inet led me down a different rabbit hole, and that is the Comet Pro. The Comet Pro is a new KVM, IP KVM released by gl-inet. And effectively, it's a low latency KVM bridge that allows you to plug in an Ethernet, plug in HDMI, give it some power, plug in a USB port, and what looks almost best can be described as like a little pager. It has a little ARM Cortex A53 in there, has I think 1 gigabyte of RAM and 32 gigs of storage, and if I was to guess, runs Pi KVM under the hood. Now, I brought this up in our pre-show discussion, and I have to tell you, the feedback I got was, hey, are you familiar with the previous generation of the gl-inet KVM? They did this before, and it wasn't a very good product. So take this with a grain of salt. This thing hasn't been released yet. The previous track record they have is not great making this sort of thing. There are other IP KVMs out there that are better. So again, I would say take all of this with a grain of salt. But if you're looking for a company that has open source values, or at least is willing to capitalize on open source values, you might take another look at GL-iNet. And if you have a GL-iNet device and you haven't yet gone to toh.openwrt.org and looked for the stock OpenWRT image, you might consider doing that and falling down the rabbit hole with me. Now, my last question is for you, Steve. I looked at toh.openwrt.org, and guess what I found? I found that the Unify U6 is a flashable supported device. And so my question to you is, how would you feel about the U6 that you left in my capable possession? How would you feel about flashing that with OpenWRT and seeing if it can beat the 15-year-old D-Link?
Well, honestly, at this point, I just want stable internet. Not even internet. I had another incident today with Wi-Fi. It was terrible. I ended up removing one of the VLANs from all of the access points except for the one in the shed. Side note, the one in the chicken coop, that one is the oldest access point that I have by far, and zero problems with that one, and it's Unify. But anyways, I already stripped the house back to the studs, and I have moved more than half of the Wi-Fi clients back to the old 15-year-old D-Link that I've got. So all that to say is, I just need something working.
Okay. I'm staring at the page for the Unify 6 LR, which I'm pretty sure is the exact piece of hardware that you have, and that's currently in my possession. And they have an installation firmware, they have an information page. So again, to kind of sing some praises to OpenWRT, I'll bet you, having not tried this on this specific piece of hardware, that if I follow their documentation to a T, I'm going to get the desired result. That is to say, OpenWRT will be running on that access point. And then in theory, we should be able to plug it in and be able to get you what you need without having to change the mounts, without having to do anything by way of the spousal approval factor. All of the things will just line up and hopefully work. And then, if nothing else, you'll go from a very stripped down Wi-Fi thing from 15 years ago to a very stripped down, individually managed Wi-Fi thing from today. And so it'll be like a minor improvement. It hasn't really fixed anything, but it at least gets you to, hopefully, a place of stability, and then we can grow from there.
It also won't be on my floor.
Won't be on your
D-Link is.
Yeah, right. Yes, it can mount on the ceiling. Yeah, thank you for that. You're always finding the upside. It can mount to the existing ceiling mount that's already there.
Yep. Yeah. Like I said, I'm getting to the point. I don't know what the problem is, but I'm getting to the point where I'm ready to just toss it all out.
No Wi-Fi. Go back to wired cables.
Well, can't really do that. The home automation would break. But yeah, why don't they make more of these things with Ethernet?
I got an idea. You just get lots of little access point and then just gaff tape the automation thing to everything gets its own access point and just stick them together. That'll do it.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Probably drive. They don't talk about lack of spousal approval. Hey, Steve, why is all this stuff hanging out of the wall? Well, they each get their own access point. You see, and we got wire running. Yeah, that's probably not going to work. All right, the music in our ears, it means we're out of time. We thank you for joining us. We record the show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central. You can join us live at AskNoahShow.com. Did you miss it? You didn't catch us live? That's okay. We record everything, and we publish it for you in its entirety in the back catalog. Where do you get that? Podcast.AskNoahShow.com. While you're there, check out the show notes. You'll find all the articles and references we use to make the show. Want to catch more? Head over to noahc.us. There you'll find my entire broadcasting schedule as well as an event schedule, where I'll be and when. I'd love to meet up with you. We'll see you back next week, 6 p.m. Central.